Welcome to ecosystems and the dynamics of speciation. The first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is an ecosystem? Well, an ecosystem contains all of the biotic and abiotic factors within that environment, including how those biotic and abiotic factors interact with one another. The biotic factors within any environment are going to be the living factors within that environment. So we're looking at animals, plants, as well as the microbiome, such as bacteria and protists. The abiotic factors within an environment or ecosystem are going to be the non-living things. So you're looking at sunlight, temperature, water, geological features such as oceans or rivers or mountains and canyons. You're also looking at things like the weather. Weather and weather patterns have a huge impact on ecosystems. Now, when you take these biotic and abiotic factors together, they are going to determine the survivability of an organism within that environment, as well as the variation that you see within that organism species. Let's consider this example. Here we're looking at a picture of a bobcat within its environment. If we look at the biotic factors, we can see the bobcat, the bushes, and trees, all of those things around it. The abiotic factors are going to be the rocks, the dirt, water, air temperature, and other non-living things. If we consider this picture as a whole, we can see that there are some striking similarities between the biotic factors and the abiotic factors. Take the bobcat, for instance. The bobcat has tan and speckled fur. If we look at its environment has tan and speckled rocks and dirt. You'll also know that the bark of the trees is very similar to the color of the bobcat as well. What does this mean? It means that the bobcat is specifically adapted to its environment. This is going to allow it to sneak up on its prey better and hide from potential predators. These traits that it has are beneficial, and because they're so beneficial, it's going to increase its chances for survival, as well as its offspring's chances for survival when it passes those beneficial traits on to its offspring. So, how do abiotic and biotic factors influence an ecosystem? As we can see from the bobcat example, the abiotic factors are going to directly influence the biotic factors within that ecosystem. They're going to make the traits of the animals, plants, and other organisms within that ecosystem either beneficial or harmful, thus influencing the survivability of an organism within that ecosystem. Organisms with better traits are going to survive better and pass on those traits to their offspring, and organisms that don't have as beneficial traits are going to die off. Let's take a look at a few more examples. Here we have a forest environment as well as an Arctic environment. Consider the fennec fox. Which environment would this animal be better suited to? Well, in this case, it would probably be better suited to a deciduous forest. It's warmer in the summer, a little bit warmer in the winter, doesn't get quite as cold as the Arctic, so he would probably survive better here. You can also see that his color patterns and his fur would also allow him to hide well in this environment. Consider this weasel. We'll notice it has white and black fur, primarily white, so odds are it would survive best in an Arctic environment, where its fur is going to help it blend in and hide from predators. Now consider the silver fox. This animal has primarily black and white fur, and if we look at these two environments, you'll notice that it actually has a pretty striking similarity to both environments. In fact, this animal would indeed survive well in both of these environments. If you look at how it appears in its environment, over in the forested side, its dark and white fur helps it to blend into the shadows that are cast by the trees and the plants, making it ideal for it to be able to sneak up on its prey. In the Arctic one, while standing against the white snow, it does seem to stand out. You'll notice that the trees in the background look very much like its fur pattern, meaning that in both of these environments, it would be very well suited to survive and be able to catch prey. In fact, where this animal actually comes from, it looks very much like the Arctic in the winter and the forest in the summer, making it ideally suited to both of these environments. So as you can see from these examples, both the biotic and abiotic factors within ecosystems directly influence the growth and development of a species. And when a species is able to cope with those changes, it's called adaptation. Now, adaptation occurs all the time because ecosystems are dynamic. They're dynamic because there are a whole bunch of factors within ecosystems that drive whether or not an organism is going to be able to survive, whether or not its traits are beneficial or harmful. We call these factors limiting factors. It's any naturally occurring factor within an environment that's going to stop or decrease the growth of a population. There are two kinds of limiting factors. The first one is density-dependent limiting factors. These are factors that are going to have a greater impact on a population within an ecosystem when populations are high. Things like food availability, shelter, disease, mate availability, water, competition, predation, parasitism, and a whole bunch of others. When populations are high, competition can be fierce. And only the organisms that are best suited to get those resources, such as food or water or a mate, are going to be able to survive to pass on those beneficial traits that they have to their offspring. You also have density independent limiting factors. These are factors that are going to happen no matter what the population size is. For example, human activities like deforestation, the damming of rivers, poaching, all right, seasonal changes. Organisms have to be able to survive these kinds of changes and adapt to these kinds of changes within their ecosystems in order, again, for them to survive. The organisms that are best suited to cope with changes within density-dependent factors and density-independent factors are the ones that are going to survive best, and therefore are actually going to be able to pass on their traits to the next generation. Because in the end, there can only be one within any niche within an ecosystem. Charles Darwin said it best. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is the most adaptable to change. Consider this. An island has an abundance of long, curve-shaped flowers. A small population of finches is blown to the island during a storm. The species of finch shows some variation in beak shape between individuals of the species. Which of these individuals is going to adapt to the new ecosystem better? If we look at this population of finches, we can see the variety within beak shape. The more yellowish one has a straighter beak. The one that's a little bit more brown has a slightly curved beak. Considering that the flowers on this island have a curved shape, it's reasonable to think that the one with the more curved beak is going to be the one that's going to survive the best in this environment. Over time, the individuals with the more beneficial traits are going to gain better fitness within their environment. What this is going to do is cause a shift in that population from more straight-beaked birds to a more pronounced curve on the beak. Eventually, the genetic changes that led to the adaptation of a more pronounced curved beak are going to become so extreme that the original population and the selected population can no longer interbreed. When this happens, the selected population is now its own unique species. and this is what we call speciation, the process by which the dynamics of an ever-changing ecosystem apply pressure to an original species so that adaptations can occur and new species are produced from an original population. And now you know how the dynamics within ecosystems leads to new species. Thanks for listening.